So good evening. On behalf of the Northeast Conference, I would like to welcome you to our fall-winter virtual workshop series. This series has been generously sponsored by Wayside Publishing. Please visit waysidepublishing.com for more information about how Wayside can assist with your remote teaching and learning needs. My name is Jill Schimmel, NECTFL Director, and I will be hosting this evening's workshop along with fellow director Beth Slocum as co-host. We are grateful to our presenter, Kathryn Rump, for offering us her time and expertise. Today's workshop, Tiered Interpretive Tasks for Authentic Text, will be recorded, and a link to the recording and to a PDF of the slides. I know you're going to ask that, so you'll have access to the recording and the slides that will be posted on our website as soon as it is available. The workshop is scheduled to last 1 hour with 45 to 50 minutes devoted to the presentation, and then the remaining time will serve as Q&A with Kathryn to answer your questions. Attendees are encouraged to submit questions during the workshop using the chat box. In the event of technical difficulties, please do try to reconnect. We'll let you in as we see you in the waiting room. And if the problem is on our end, we'll email all attendees with further instructions when available. And now, please let me take this opportunity to introduce you to our presenter, Kathryn Rump. Kathryn is a Spanish teacher in Middletown, Delaware. She loves fusing learning language and culture with games and with game-based learning and music and technology. Her lessons focus on personalization and integration of comprehensible input. She regularly engages her students with a variety of authentic texts, Web 2.0 tools, and game-based learning. She had the honor of being DECTFL's 2020 Teacher of the Year, and is a member of the 2021-2022 ACTFL LILL Cohort. That's amazing. She has degrees from the University of Delaware, a BA in 3 foreign languages, Westchester University in Spanish education, and Wilmington University, Master's in Applied Technology. Kathryn, thank you so much for sharing your time with us. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here with everyone. Happy New Year. And after that introduction, there's not much else for me to say. I was so thrilled when NECTFL reached out to me to ask if I'd like to present with them this fall/winter. And I'm really excited to be here with you this evening. In addition to some of the other things that I'm involved with, I'm also our Aspira Club advisor at my high school. So that's been really fulfilling this year in what I'm sure for many of us has been just a crazy year with schedules changing and students in and out of the building. So it's been really awesome for me to connect with the Aspira Club students. So tonight, we'll be talking about our tiered tasks for authentic texts. And in our table of contents here, you'll see that we'll talk a little bit about what are tiered tasks, the purpose of tiered tasks, using tiered tasks and kind of linking them with proficiency. I'll give you some resources and then we'll see some examples. And since I teach Spanish, the examples that we'll see this evening will be in Spanish. So to start talking about what are tiered tasks, this is a definition of what could be a tiered lesson or a task. And it's groups that work toward learning the same content, yet they utilize different processes, varying in depth and complexity to develop different products to demonstrate understanding. Groups are chosen by student choice or by pre-assessment. So you could allow students to pick their own group, or it might be something that the teacher determines. These are some of the components or elements that could go into tiered assignments, different levels of challenge, creating a different product, getting to the end by a different process, different forms of technology using either video, you could use like spoken, just recording your voice, responding with text, Those are just some of the ways that you could incorporate different technology, different levels, giving the students different resources to use, content, and complexity. And it can be a combination of these elements. Not every single tiered assignment needs to have all of these, because that would be kind of difficult, I think, to incorporate all of them at one time. So by picking and choosing based on the assignment, based on knowing your students, you're able to use different elements in different assignments. And the tiered lesson itself, or the tiered assignment, is a differentiation strategy. So it can address a particular standard, a key concept, or a generalization, but remember that it allows several pathways for students to arrive in an understanding of these components. So it can be based on their interests, readiness, or their learning profiles, which again could be student choice or predetermined by the teacher. We'll talk a little bit about what is the purpose of tiered tasks. So I'm going to illustrate two purposes here. The first, which is helping all learners. And it's really important that they're developed using a variety of complexity of the task, okay? So it's meeting different depth, different levels of abstractness for students who need that push, and various degrees of scaffolding or direction for those that might need additional support. And it also provides students with parallel tasks. They're not doing something that is demonstrating different knowledge, but rather demonstrating the same knowledge, working within their range of skills. And it's important that you're giving them, within their parallel task, something that's meaningful within their skill range, so that someone's not just doing a word search and others are creating like an essay. It has to be a meaningful task that has a purpose for them, and it doesn't feel either too challenging or just like a busy work. These are some of the steps that teachers can use when they're creating a tiered task. They'll identify their outcomes. So what will students be able to know, understand, be able to do, or be able to demonstrate? We'll take in, again, that thought of your students' learning profile, thinking of their readiness, their interests, and then what activities will get them ready to then do their different tiered levels of task. And then you could break them up into up to 3 groups, depending on what you're doing. Maybe it's not always 3. Remember that you are forming tiers based on your assessment of your students' abilities to handle the material particular to that lesson. And so in the future, students can be regrouped the next time you use a tiering strategy. Just because they were in group 1 for this particular day doesn't mean they'll be in group 1 next time, where group 1 is typically the group that needs the most support, 2 is in the middle, and then 3 needs the least support or can handle a more complex or in-depth task. These are some of the ideas that you might consider when you're making a tiered task, by adjusting level of complexity, how much structure you're giving to students, the materials you provide them to use, the timing or pace, do they have additional time to work? And for those who might get done faster, you'll want to make sure you have another meaningful way for them to move on to new material, or provide a more in-depth demonstration of what you're currently working on. You can adjust the number of steps. How much chunking do students need? Their form of expression. So is it an essay? Is it sentences? Is it spoken or written? Is it a video? and then their level of dependence. How much are you modeling with them, working with them one-on-one, or allowing them to work more independently? So we've talked a little bit about how students get which tier, and we mentioned determining by assessment. When you're a little farther into your school year, or maybe you knew the student previously, you might have a good idea or a better idea of where are they at the moment. You can determine again by asking the students their preference, using prior knowledge of them and their preferences, or even allowing them to change if needed in the middle, if they realize it's too easy or too hard. And that's where having an open communication with your students and building a relationship can be really key. If students notice that someone else has a different version, you can make sure that they understand that at times people will be working on something within the same material at their skill level, which may include extra support, or it may push them to expand their learning. And it's important that those who are ready to move to a more complex level understand that they're not going to be necessarily given something that they can just easily brush off and do really quickly, whereas you want them to be able to really demonstrate their knowledge because they're ready for something that's a little more higher level thinking or requires more complexity in their response. So at this point, are there any thoughts that attendees have or any questions? And I want you to do a little reflection of how have you used or how will you use tiered lessons or tasks in your class? A lot of the time, because of the title of this webinar, I like to use them with the authentic text to make them a little more accessible for students, as they're often pretty complex. And by having them identify different meaning, or not different meaning, but different ways what they're gathering meaning from the text, that's how I really like to use tiered tasks in my class. Anyone else have any thoughts? Alexis says that she's done web quests to build background knowledge. Sounds really fun. I like to use web quests or kind of electronic breakout rooms. If you've ever done a breakout room, those can be fun to get the students kind of engaged with the material without feeling like it's just another worksheet. Any other thoughts or ideas you think about or like to share?
I have just a question about your process. And I love everything that you're saying about the differentiation that's involved. About how large are your class sizes that you're using these tiered lessons with, like, and how many kids per group? I guess just logistics is what I'm looking for.
Yeah, it does vary. In the lower level classes, like level 1 or 2, the classes tend to be larger, at least usually around 30 kids. And the grouping doesn't always end up being even. You might have just a few within each group, like the number 1 group, which is usually those who need the most support, may not have as many students as the middle group, which is your number 2, and then number 3 might have few as well. So it kind of depends on what is the task exactly. And the way that you might do if it's on paper is just having not as many copies as the one, or if you're using your online learning system, doing the way where you can individually assign to different groups so that they don't see all 3 and then panic when they think they have 3 separate assignments. So it really varies how many are in each group, and it can change each time, because remember, we on our tiering based on each individual lesson or assignment. And just because you were advanced at one doesn't mean you're necessarily in the other. So logistically, it is a little bit more work, of course, getting the 3 ready or even 2, and then deciding who gets each one or allowing them to reflect and then choose their own can take more time. So it's not necessarily something you do every single lesson or every single time, just because of the complexity in setting up the activity. Any other questions at this time or thoughts of how you used or might plan to use a tiered lesson or task? All right, well, we're going to keep going. And if any other thoughts or questions come up, again, feel free to put them in the chat. We'll talk a little bit now about tiered tasks and proficiency. And these are 2 definitions of proficiency that I found. The first is that language proficiency is the ability to use a language in real-world situations during spontaneous interactions or a non-rehearsed context in a way that's appropriate and acceptable for native speakers of the language. And kind of a more compact definition is that proficient learners can communicate about something appropriately and accurately for a purpose. So both of them talk a little bit about appropriate and acceptable or accurate. And I think that's really important when we're working with our students and thinking, okay, how are they going to communicate what they know or demonstrate what they can understand? Because more and more, many of us are using this more proficiency-based way of approaching class and what can students do versus nitpicking every little word. And I think it's really important that we bring this proficiency part in, not just as the teacher knowing what it means, but making sure that our students have an understanding of what is proficiency. I really like this graphic that I found from World Language Classroom, where it gives you what students are doing at the novice, intermediate, and advanced level. And I love the titles that they have at the top where it says they're a parrot and they're really just kind of saying back their rehearsed phrases. They're moving up then to survivor or creator. They're starting to put them together. They might be able to get by if they were in a country that's speaking the language. And then reporter is someone who can come up with more detail, tell a story. So I'd really like this graphic, and that's why I wanted to include it, moving up each level. And then this one tells you how might you increase your proficiency. And it's, yeah, I just saw in the chat, the resource empowers students on their proficiency journey to say, where am I now? And what might I do in order to increase my proficiency? And look at all I can do when I am at a certain proficiency. So having a conversation, being intermediate low, a lot of our students might be kind of like a novice, but able to like bump up, you know, to say like, oh, I can start to see that I'm working within an intermediate range. So it's really nice to be able to illustrate that for them. And some people are maybe familiar with doing an activity with students that help them kind of get a further understanding of proficiency, where they're given a task and they'll do it in their shared language, which for most of us is English. And you'll ask them to work in groups to describe something. And where we live, usually we ask them to describe either the beach, because the beach is not too far, or ask them to describe a Wawa hoagie sandwich. So the students will then kind of get an idea of, okay, I can only use words, I might spell something wrong, moving into phrases, simple sentences with a few details, describing with sentences, detailed paragraph, and then finally your paragraph with details, and then it says including a story. So I think it's really nice when they do something like this, maybe at the beginning of the year or the semester, for them to really see, like, if I'm in Spanish 1 or I'm in level 1, I am not writing a paragraph, because so much of the time students might feel like, oh, I need to write this big essay about myself and I better go to Google Translate to make sure I'm saying it correctly. And I think when they can maybe realize, like, oh, I'm over here and I'm just using some really familiar words and phrases that we've used in class, hopefully it gives them more of like an ownership, instead of feeling like, oh, I just have to produce something that's in the target language, even if I don't know what it's saying. And so when we're kind of thinking of that, oh, let's see, we got something. Do the scavenger hunt at the beginning. Oh, I like that idea. And let them research information at their level. Oh, that sounds really fun. And Ronnie's saying it's important to have them understand the proficiency and then they become interested in leveling up. I agree. If they see what they can do and what they can practice in order to level up, you can almost kind of turn it into a game and make them feel really good. Yeah. So when we're thinking of proficiency within our different tasks and looking back at, using the task for interpreting a text, our novice learners can identify words, maybe give the main idea in very general and broad terms, recognize high frequency vocabulary or phrases. They would probably require more scaffolding and potentially fewer options if they're picking from something, or the support of a word bank. Intermediate are identifying phrases, some main ideas with a few more details, using familiar topics and some scaffolding. And then moving to our advanced learners, identify phrase and sentences. They can give specific details. They'll have more a variety of topics and then need less scaffolding. And these are just some of the ways that you might make different tiers for the different levels of proficiency. One of the resources that I like to pull from is Senora Chase. She has a blog and she has interpretive quick quizzes, and these can be used for any target language. If you use the QR thing here, it'll bring up the website, or the website's down here. And I have a list of links for everyone that you can get towards the end of today, where it's going to give you all of the links to different things that I might mention during the presentation. But these are really nice Google Forms. You copy them into your drive, and then at the end of a lesson where you're like, oh, I have 5-10 minutes left, what can I do? You can just give them one of these interpretive quick quizzes, and she has them for reading and listening. And I believe there's 3 or 4 tiers for each one. So they're really nice. And she gives very detailed instructions if you're not very familiar with copying and moving things into your Google Drive. So you'll be able to access the links when we share the presentation. So we're at another point of reflection. Some of this conversations kind of come up naturally, but is there any other way that you incorporate proficiency in your class, and any other way how you help your students understand what their proficiency is? I think we shared some pretty good ideas with using proficiency so far. I always like to find on YouTube also from like the OPI interviews, examples of English learners, and have the students try and guess when they see someone who's learning English doing the interview, what level they think they are. And sometimes it's a little bit funny, and I hope they get from that, seeing that video, like it can be intimidating learning any language, and that it's okay to make mistakes and it's okay to kind of have fun and laugh. But at the end of the day, you want to kind of have that open mindset of like, okay, I still kind of understood what they said. I know that they're learning and I know that they're going to improve. The scavenger hunt activity, reflection after major assessments, that sounds like a great idea. Yeah, having them reflect on what did I do here? What did I do well? Where might I improve on future assignments? That's a great idea too. All right, this next piece is very quick, and all of these links will be provided. These are just some of the authentic text resources that colleagues and friends of mine use when I ask them for ideas. So there's just a couple there in French, and I think I have some more that I could share. Spanish, there's so many. These are just two of the places that I might use. And the Naciones Unidas, or the United Nations, their website can be translated, I think, into about 5 languages that I saw there. Italian Focus Junior has nice kind of simplified texts. Arabic, these are YouTube videos and different lessons. German has some current events. Chinese are more news and current events. This is videos for Japanese. And ASL, these are some daily news videos, and Seek the World is all about travel. And then for all, this website Audio Lingua has different recordings of varying quality, we'll say, but for a variety of topics and target languages. So all of these texts will be shared with you, all the links. And I would be remiss if I didn't mention Leslie Gran. I'm sure many of us are familiar with her and her wealth of resources and knowledge, and just a wonderful sharing that she does with us. So make sure, if you've not checked out her website, Grind for Lang, that you take a look. There is a bounty of ideas and how to structure lessons, ideas for virtual teaching, everything that you could really think of. You're going to find something that you can use from Leslie's website. And now we'll see just some examples of some of the lessons that I've made that go with authentic texts. And these are just 3 different ones. I didn't include any graphic organizers, but I really like using those too. These are all more of just like kind of reading or watching the text or the video and then just answering different questions. So I'll just quickly share what some of them look like. And again, these will be provided for you for any of our Spanish teachers that they could potentially use with their classes. So our first one has 3 tiers, and it's from this girl, Martina, has her own YouTube channel. And when we take a look, it's all about this rutina de Martina. And I like to differentiate them, obviously through naming the files something differently, but for the student, when they're just glancing at it, in each one, I have a different number of the little symbol or something. So in this one, 1, 2, that means this one is like the level 2 task. And this one looks like it might only have 1. That means this one is the level 1 task. And then finally, the one with 3 little symbols has the level 3. So that way, students might not immediately know like, oh, I'm in the low one. And hopefully they don't necessarily feel bad when they're given their task. And if we think back to what I said earlier, you want to remember that the tasks are parallel and that they're all meaningful. So if we look at this one, It goes along with a YouTube video where Martina is getting up and describing her daily routine of how she gets ready for school. And in the level 3, they have some open-ended questions, don't really have any structure in addition to that. It just wants them to try and listen for the answer and be able to respond. And then it gives a little bit about her and then comparing their routine with hers. This is the level 1. And here they have more structure. They're given a choice and they can pick from the answer. Otherwise, pretty similar. And then down here, I gave them a model to follow for their routine sentences. And then the middle one has some help here in the form of a word bank, but they don't necessarily know where each one goes. That's one example. And if we take a quick look, this is her video.
Audiences give Sing 2 a 98% score on Rotten Tomatoes. And Friday, the holiday hit, Everybody Mom comes home to...
Ay, qué linda mañana. A ver. ¿Cuántos mensajes tengo? Hoy hay que elegir un outfit muy chulo. A ver. Ya sé. Esta falda.
And she'll continue going through her day. So prior to doing the tiered activity, we might watch the video together. We might have talked about what are students' daily routine and have them familiarize themselves with the kind of vocabulary. We could do this video as a movie talk or a clip talk if you're familiar with that strategy, where we turn her sound off and then I would narrate with the students what's going on, and we would ask them questions for comprehension and clarification and have them compare their routine with her, all as a way to kind of do building up together to then students watching it on their own and doing the tiered task. The other examples that I have, this one goes with an article from the website Muy Interesante, and it's all about chicken that's created in the lab and would students want to eat that chicken. So again, I used the little symbols. There's either 1, 2, or 3 chickens on the paper. This one's level 3, so it has the least amount of structure. You can see these are just the open-ended questions. 2, it's very similar to the other one. 2 gives them the word bank. And then number 1 gives them the multiple choice. And the article is about how they grow artificial chicken in the lab, but that you can eat using the cells from other chickens. Kind of interesting. And I usually like to do this when we're talking about food and what students are interested in eating. And the last example from the movie El Laberinto del Fauno, or Pan's Labyrinth, if you've seen that movie. This one only has 2 activities. They watch the beginning part of the movie where it's narrating in the past tense. And level 1 gives them a little bit more structure, picking what kind of movie they think it is based on the picture, making predictions. They have a word bank, putting a circle around verbs that they hear during the video, putting things in order, and then providing them here, they have to write an ending to the movie and what happened, giving them a word bank, and then giving them this to help them with their verb structure. Part 4, they want to draw a scene based on the ending they create. And then the other one, I didn't create 3 for this one. This one, just not quite as much structure there. This is the same where they're listening for what verbs do they hear. And then just not as much down here. They don't get that verb chart. All right. So those are just some ideas, and by no means is it the only way to tier tasks, but they're just ones that I've used and created with my students. And yes, you'll receive a link to the different tasks there. These are some of the references that I used. So if you're interested in some further research and learning about tiered tasks and tiered lessons, they're right here. You could go and find them. And I have to give credit to Slides Mania for the slide design. They're by far my favorite when I'm looking for something a little more than just the slides that Google provides. And I just want to say thank you so much for coming. I know that it was a little bit quick tonight, but thank you so much for coming, and I hope you please keep in touch. That's my email address, or you can connect with me on Twitter or Instagram. My name is Senor Rump Spanish. But I know that we'll open it up here for any dialogue or thoughts that attendees have after seeing the presentation.
Thank you for sharing and your presentation. So we can definitely open up to questions. We have 20 minutes, so we welcome your questions, right? This is a lot to think through, the many layers of tiering tasks to challenge all our learners. So we welcome your questions. You can put them in the chat.
And I so appreciate being new to this, looking at the care with your assignments, Kathryn, and seeing that extra, to me, it's like that extra touch of the icons that you put in there. So it's clear to you, but it's not, out there, like very sensitive to the kids in the room, and that they're all, again, like you said, it's a parallel task. And as new to that, it seems very challenging. Like, do you have any tips for us of how, if we have that topic that we're working on currently, what would be a good way for us to start? Like, I wrote in my notes that for 1, multiple choice, and for 2, word bank, and for 3, open-ended. Do you have some like tips to help get us started?
Usually, if I know I'm going to be creating all 3, I start with the number 1 because that has the most structure. And after I have that one created, I make the others and I take away from each one what doesn't necessarily need to be there. You could do it in a different way. You could have different graphic organizers. And again, one could be very structured where it's like, what happened first, second, third. One could be like very open-ended and be like, tell the story here. And then one might be giving them just the prompts of like the words for first and the words for second, word for third. So it doesn't always necessarily mean like, oh, multiple choice only for this type or open-ended only. So again, if you go to Leslie's website, that's where you're going to see where I got a lot of my ideas from in a workshop that she did with the teachers from my district, or I think it was all of Delaware a couple years ago. And that's where you might see some other ideas to be like, oh, okay, I can do it this way, and asking them to do, just identifying words or giving more of like a fuller detailed sentence. Any favorite graphic organized resources? Oh, I think I have one. I might have it bookmarked. I can go and find it. Bigger classes where you break kids up into smaller groups at each level. That's a good idea. You could have them like, okay, all number 1s work together. You could have them all number 2s, all number 3s. Probably I wouldn't have like all the same ones working together, because like Alexis is pointing out, you'll have like the one kid who's just like, all right, let me see what you wrote. So I would not have them working in a group of probably larger than 2 or 3 together, just so that has that kind of accountability piece. That's true. Ronnie has mentioned that Leslie has some really good links for graphic organizers as well. You can get lost down the rabbit hole of Leslie's website and finding all of the materials that she shared, or her Pinterest board if you've ever been there. But typically you would start with the one that needs the most structure, and then you can just take away a little bit. One of the other ideas that you might do, and I didn't mention this, is that you might have them all answering the same exact questions, but it's the text that's different. So you could have them either maybe just viewing a picture, or maybe someone's reading a paragraph, or someone's watching a video all on the same topic, and then they're answering the exact same questions. So you could do it kind of the other way, so to say, is where we all have the same worksheet, but I'm looking at something different from you. So there's kind of 2 ways you can go about it. You could tier the task, which is what we talked about more in depth here, or you could give them different levels of the authentic text. Now that one definitely takes more time, going out and finding those resources. So it just is not something, again, that you necessarily do every time. One way that you could do is that if you're familiar with NearPod or PairDeck, is the students are working together either on their own pace or, you know, the teacher's pace. And then in the middle, at least I know for NearPod, and I'm not as familiar with PairDeck, you can say like, all right, keep your original one open up a second tab and go and complete this side task. And that's the one that's tiered. So they're all doing the same thing. Come to a part where there's a little assessment in the middle. They do a different tier, and then you keep going and come back after like a little reflection on that. So there's different ways. It doesn't have to be necessarily like this whole big tiered thing where you're creating this long worksheet. It might just be a little something in the middle where you're like, all right, now after we've all been working on reading this article together, just go and answer this one question. And that's where those Senora Chase little interpretive Google Forms come in nicely as well. Let's see, we have a comment that Ronnie's saying infographics are very good for tiering. Some have more visuals to support text and others very little. That's yes. So different forms of graphic organizers used for the same text can be really nice, depending on what exactly you want the students to demonstrate. And like I said, I didn't provide any ideas for like infographics or using pictures, but those are always really nice to give to students. I'd love to use infographics with them and have them do different things with it. It can be like highlighting where you have a question, putting a star next to something that's interesting, retelling it by summarizing it in writing or speaking, picking out the most important details and putting those into a summary. So there's different ways that you could do with like a infographic as well.
And some great questions in the chat. Anna asked about multi-level groups, and this is something I see in New York City schools: heritage speakers with low novice. Everyone's in the same classroom, right? And suggestions for authentic text for multiple levels. And I know Leslie Grand uses the term respectful tasks, so everyone feels like validated and engaged. So welcoming your ideas here.
Using authentic text for multiple levels. It is challenging for sure when someone's like, well, I already know the language, so I don't have to do anything. And then someone is really working so hard and at their, their novice level and trying to level up. I guess for those, it's really just, again, like, what are you asking them to demonstrate they understand from it? And sometimes within my class, like, I'll have a native speaker who doesn't speak English yet, and then a student who's kind of stronger in class will go and help them. So it's maybe doing some pair work and having them work together can sometimes help. But it is really hard because you want them to work on something that's worthwhile. And if it's just like, oh, I already get it, or I don't get it at all, it really makes it hard. Maybe for like your native speakers and they're doing authentic text, you could ask them to do like an analysis of like why, or give a perspective, like why is the author creating this for someone? Like, why would they make this article about chicken that's grown in the laboratory? So thinking of like kind of like the Bloom's taxonomy and going up to those higher level of thinking type questions. Short stories, poems that you might use. That's a good idea. But yeah, that question is definitely challenging. So if anyone else has thoughts on the heritage speakers and then novice lows mixed in the same class, I'd love to hear other ideas.
Yeah, feel free to unmute. We're a small group and we have some time. So Hakima, would you like to unmute and share anything? Putting you on the spot.
Sorry. Oh, yes, I can. Thank you. Actually, I work also with heritage learners. So yes, I like to use with them short cuentos, like short stories. And, just like it is just like basically aparting from the big picture to the lowest picture with them. And I do not like to make them read so much because I know that we think that, just like reading would help them, just like to understand all the structures about the language and stuff. But what I do is just like I use my technique of mapped text. So what I do is just like see what is the importance from that, and then I get them to speak, because part of this they need, just like to have some confidence using the language, because they hear it at home anyways. So I don't cancel them out if they say something related to their dialect in classroom. In fact, I just welcome them to say that. And then from there, we part to what it is, just like the formal way of saying it. And I tell them that we do this just because the formal way, it is a way that that you can, just like communicate with other people who are not from that, who doesn't understand the dialect. So I use also short film for it. Hey, I use a short film. Sometimes I take some type of music that it is related, but to make it authentic, I always try to find something that it is related to what they are used to, that what they are connected to, what they live with as well. For example, like for example, one of the texts that I used, it was an article in the newspaper. It talks about los superhéroes, the superheroes of Mexico DF. And then I started the lesson from, okay, we have, for example, here Superman. Do we have another Superman somewhere else? And they are real superheroes that they are, for example, helping people in Mexico DF, in Mexico Ciudad, like, just like, for example, cross the road or get, just like portable water or other stuff. So I use these things like to get them engaged, and then they will be reading without me just pointing out that they need to read, and then, just like get to the other stuff. So this is basically what I use with them. And even though that they are, just like at certain level, even level low, but, once you open for them the opportunity to speak with each other, and to speak about something that it is interesting to them, and to something that it is related to the countries that they come from, I assure you there are going to be, just like some kind of nice of participation, nice lessons you are going to have with them. So basically that's what I would like to share. I have another thing, but just like you got me off guard, so I didn't, just like get a big list of it, but I can send it over, just like when I finish, because I am right now developing a curriculum for them that I want to propose to my county here in North Carolina about, just like the inclusion of the study of variation with heritage learners. So yes, I'm including map text again and short films and some games in it. So yeah.
Thank you for sharing all that.
Mhm.
So we'll begin to wrap up. And I know Kathryn mentioned she had a document with links. So if you want to put that in the chat, that's amazing. So yeah. So thank you, Kathryn, for that very informative presentation. And thank you, Beth, for moderating. And just thank you all for your engagement at this first week back at the end of a long day. So just thank you for all being here. As I mentioned at the beginning of this workshop, it has been recorded. The recording will be made available on our website tomorrow. New York State teachers who need proof of attendance for CTLE credit, we love CTLE, please use the links provided at nectfl.org/virtual. Teachers in other states may use the same links. Please consult your local district and/or state regulations regarding documenting PD hours. If you haven't yet, please do register now to attend the 2022 Northeast Conference here in New York City. New York City's open. We can't wait to see you in real life. This year's theme is Classroom Roots Global Reach, and it's sure to generate some interesting discussions. The complete preliminary program and registration information are available at nectfl.org conference, which we'll put in the chat. On behalf of the nectfl Board of Directors, thank you for attending this workshop and enjoy your evening. I'm going to stop recording.